Live.
Okay, we are live. Thank you very much, everybody. Good evening and welcome to the second Audit and Governance meeting of this civic year. I'm Josh Williams, Councillor for Park Ward and Chair. We've got no members of the public. I'm skipping the webcast notice, which makes me feel, I know I feel naughty, but we do have a councillor in attendance. I have no apologies this evening, but we note, I think if we could, that Councillor Debs Edwards, who made many insightful and important contributions here, I think, leaves the committee and stands down, and we offer a very warm welcome to the new member of the committee, Councillor McGoldrick. Congratulations, I think. Are there any declarations of interest this evening? No declarations of interest. Minutes. Okay, most of us were present at the last meeting. There's a couple of things in the minutes that I'm just going to quickly mention. The first is that following the internal audit report into housing repairs, members requested a senior officer in housing be invited to attend this meeting specifically to reassure the committee on progress. Unfortunately, neither of the senior officers who were in place at the time the audit review was conducted are still at RBC. We have a brand new exec director who's only been in post for a couple of weeks. So our officers have decided they'll be best placed to attend our next meeting in January. That will give them time to address the issues that were raised and get up to speed enough to report to us and answer any questions we might have. Secondly, unfortunately, we can't see the early progress against those internal audit recommendations on the audit tracker as it isn't on our agenda this evening. Officers didn't have the resource to get that properly and fully updated in time for this meeting. So that too will be fully updated for our next agenda in January. I'm not entirely happy with both of those decisions to defer. I'm disappointed committee members weren't consulted or informed in advance of those decisions. I would have tried to have pushed back on both of those to see if there was anything we could do to not defer those two items, because I think they were important. But I've spoken with officers and I'll be kept in the loop next time as chair. And I am very sympathetic to the resource pressures they're all under. So I don't know if members wish to make any comments on any of that, or if you're happy to agree the minutes as an accurate record. Happy to agree? Or would you like to speak? Or is that agreement?
That's agreement.
Lovely. Agreed. Thank you very much. We have no questions from members of the public this evening, which is item 3. So item 4, we do, I think, have EY on our big screen. So our first item of business is the external auditor update, presenting their draft audit results report for 2021. We have Adrian Barmer. We have a new member of the committee this evening. So I wonder if you could introduce yourself briefly and then introduce your report. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and hello, committee. So my name is Adrian Barmer. I'm a senior manager with EY, so the external auditor for the council. I've been involved with the audit for the last 4 or 5 years, so I have a good understanding and knowledge of some of the historical issues which the council have faced, and also importantly some of the real steps they've made to try and move forward with some of the historical issues in terms of the accounts. And obviously we've reported consistently through this committee in terms of those new challenges and also kind of new opportunities as well. So tonight I present the 2021 draft audit results report. So this brings the council up to date in terms of where we are with the 2021 audit. I think before I start, it's important to probably point out just to remind the committee as well, actually, that we actually only signed off the 1920 accounts on the 26th of May. So real good progress over the summer and kind of bringing us to this position to kind of being able to report a substantial progress on the audit, but also kind of where we are in terms of conclusion and kind of what we need to do to get there. So we'll take the committee through some of the key aspects of the report. For members who've been on the committee for a while, you'll be familiar with the format of the report. There is a lot of detail in there, but I think it's important just to pull out some of the key points. So if I could just take the committee through the executive summary. So in my report, it's page number 6. And it just talks you through some of the key points and some of the key areas that have kind of changed as a result, I suppose, of some of the impact of COVID, for example, which was relevant at 2021 for a number of aspects of the council's financial statements, specifically property, plant and equipment and investment property. Because at that time there was kind of issues around reliable market data due to the lack of transactional values and various other aspects in terms of some of the assumptions. So some additional focus around specifically on 2021 aspects of property, plant and equipment and investment property subject to fair value measurements. COVID also, as part of 2021, obviously threw up some issues around going concern disclosures. And I know there's an issue or an item on the agenda tonight which talks you through the 2021 going concerns disclosure. Another area which we highlight on page 6 of my report is around the triennial valuation of the pension fund. So that's the valuation which is done every 3 years, which then sets the forward funding mechanism for the pension fund for the forward 3-year period. And just because of the valuation timing and the fact that the 2021 accounts were still open, that was considered new information and an additional piece of work that we needed to do as part of our consideration. So we've done the work on the triennial valuation and we're happy to conclude that we've no issues to report or no impact noted on the 2021 accounts, which are still subject to audit. In terms of section 2 of the report, pages 11 to 18 of my report, talks you through the significant risks we've identified in the other areas of audit focus. So those are the areas that really drive the most work of the audit. They're the areas that are probably most subject to subjectivity. And therefore, we involve a number of our specialists, both internal valuers and internal actuaries, to look at a number of areas of the accounts, with the two biggest areas there being the work on valuations, so the property, plant and equipment and investment property valuations. We're happy to conclude actually that most of the work that our internal valuers have done actually returned reasonable assurance, so no significant findings, and there's one adjustment which has been made to the Oracle as a result of a challenge that we made and was kind of accepted by the council. So coming towards the conclusion of the work on a number of those areas, no significant findings at this stage which would actually impact our audit opinion, which is important. Section 4 of the report, and again it's page numbers 22 to 23 of my report, is the audit differences section. So I think it's important here just for the council, for the committee and as those charged with governance, just to acknowledge the changes that are made between the draft financial statements that are presented for audit and then importantly the changes that are made through to the final set of accounts. We have had really good engagement with Mark, Darren and the team. Generally we discuss those openly as part of our weekly meetings. The council has made those changes and we work through with them in a very proactive way to get to the conclusion of the accounts through the changes that we need to make. Section 5 of my report is the value for money conclusion. So for those members who've been on the committee for the last number of years, you'll know that we had reported qualifications on the value for money, specifically around it was the Ofsted findings and some of the internal control matters. We identified those 2 areas again, but we haven't concluded fully the work, so we'll report back at the next committee or certainly through an updated audit results report in terms of the conclusion in those areas, because I know specifically that reporting in Ofsted as part of the children's companies actually moved forward and there was more positive commentary coming back through from Ofsted. Section 7 of the report is the control environment, which is on pages 32 to 44 of my report. Talks you through the control findings that we've identified during the audit. These are important for the committee to note as they kind of highlight some key matters that we've identified where we believe there could be improvements in the control environment. And again, we've noted there are some of the management responses which have acknowledged the control findings and also what the intention is to kind of correct those as we move forward into future years. Section 9 of the report talks you through independence and some of the fee matters, specifically in respect of previous years. Again, we don't have any independence issues we need to report. That's at pages 52 to 54. And then importantly, at section 10, it talks you through some of the key areas. So appendix B at page 57 details some of the meetings. As I say, we've got really good engagement with Mark and his team, really open, sort of honest meetings every week where actually we talk through some of the key issues, some of the key challenges and kind of open items and how we're kind of going to close those off to kind of move towards the conclusion of the audit. Appendix D is outstanding matters. So those are the areas at page 63 of my report. which we need to work through to the conclusion. And again, we have good visibility of those both as an audit team and also as a council as well, in terms of some of the areas that we need to kind of close down before we can kind of issue our audit opinion and conclude on the audit. And then Appendix E, page 64 to 68 of my report, is the letter of representation. So this is the letter that will be signed at the end of audit, specifically by Darren on behalf of management, but also acknowledged by the chair as chair of the audit committee to sign off the letter of representation. And as I say, the 1920 account letter of representation was only signed at the end of May. But as I say, as we move towards the conclusion of the 2021 audit, it's important just for the committee just to acknowledge some of the representations that we're asking Darren to sign as Section 151 officer, but also Councillor Williams as chair, just to acknowledge that the letter has actually been discussed at this specific committee. So we'll stop there. I appreciate there's a lot in the report and there may be some questions, so happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, we're asked to note the report and the update. We are helped in that if we've read a version of this before, the updates are highlighted in blue, so we can focus our attention in on those. Progress is clearly being made. Does anyone have any comments or questions for EY? Looking down the line. Not at the moment. I've got a quick question, Adrian, if I might. Page 8 notes that a timeline for completion will be, you'll provide an update in respect of timeline. What are you thinking on timeline at the moment?
So at the moment, I'd say that we're significantly progressed against all the major areas. So there's no area that hasn't been started. I think one of the areas we talk about in the report specifically is on the pension valuation. So if I could just talk the committee quickly through the areas of work that we need to do in that. So one is in control of the audit team, so that work is complete. The other area that isn't in the control of the audit team is the assurances we need to receive from the auditors of the Royal Borough of Windsor Maidenhead Pension Fund, of which the council is an admitted body. So we originally expected their information back to us in September. They have emailed us just at the end of last week to say that that wouldn't now be possible until October, early November. So we're trying to liaise with them to see if we can kind of expedite that. I wouldn't anticipate over the next kind of 4 to 6 weeks that the largest part of the remaining parts of work will be completed. We will then move into November, which would then put us in a good position, I think, to try and move forward to conclusion, certainly this side of Christmas. I know the council are keen on and in position to present the 21-22 accounts. They're significantly progressed. So again, we're trying to close things down as quickly as possible. But certainly the next 4 to 6 weeks should certainly conclude the majority of the areas that we're currently working on. It is a small number, and actually we're now focused on trying to close those down. And there's a large number of areas we're working through, both internal review and also partner review as well.
Thank you very much. So we're looking at a sign off from Darren as 151 officer and myself as chair this year.
Yes, that's certainly the intention. We've got the resources in place to do that, so we're kind of working through to kind of do that conclusion. So,
thank you very much. Members, if anything arises, just please indicate. I've got one other question which might be a bit technical, and Adrian, we might push this to Darren Carter, but I was looking at the summary of adjusted differences. That's your page 22, and I was hoping to get an understanding of what these were and what they meant to the council. So I looked at the first one. I'll read it out. Adjustments relating to the write-off of unsubstantiated and unsupported cash reconciliation items totaling around 1.2 million. The adjustment increases corporate support services expenses, decreases cash and cash equivalent balances. So I was hoping to get an understanding of what that might mean to a layman who isn't using accounting terminology, and what it also might imply to the council, what its impact on the council, if there is any impact at all, would be. And it might be for Mr. Carter to respond, but you might have a few words first if you want, otherwise I can hand over to Darren.
No, I think either Mark or Darren might want to pick that one up.
Okay. Darren, can I hand over to you? Thank you.
Yeah, as you suggested, this is quite a technical issue, and I think the easiest way to deal with this might be for me and Mark to prepare a note and to send it round to audit committee members after the meeting, because behind this one sentence was a huge amount of work that was done on this, and I'm not confident I could appraise that sufficiently clearly tonight for audit committee members to get an appreciation of it. So
okay.
I would beg the opportunity to just email it round to members following the committee.
That would be great. If we could just get a briefing note, if you'd like to send that to me or to all members, that would be fine. I'm not seeing anyone indicating, so I presume that we don't have any questions at this time. Thank you very much to EY. Do our officers have any comments or thoughts on this EY presentation? No. Oh.
No, I mean, from my perspective, it's just great to see the progress being made again, but we need to keep this momentum up. I want 2021 signed off and I want 21-22 underway, preferably this side of Christmas. That's what I'm aiming for. Okay,
yeah, Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question in relation to other councils and timings for their accounts. How are we doing in relation to that, in relation to other councils now with our progress on our accounts?
Do you want me to give that as the initial response, Mark? Is that?
Yes, please do. Fire away.
Yeah, so I think, it's a really good question. I think if you'd asked that question of Reading two years ago, it would have been very much at the lower end of the pack. I think now the council has made significant investment. They've also committed significant time and resource into kind of getting back on track, so to speak. So I'd say the council is very much currently in the middle of the pack in terms of kind of outstanding accounts to be signed off, but certainly with the degree of progress we've made, if you think about having a set of accounts signed off in May and us reporting 4 months later that actually we're substantially through the next year of audit, it's that's kind of a significant statement to make. Normally you wouldn't see that. It usually takes probably about a year to get to that point. So I think it's just a reflection of the commitment from both teams to try and work through the open years of audits to close those down and really get the council through to kind of being in a position to kind of do multiple years of accounts and then really have the finance team function focused not solely on accounts. Like, this takes a lot of time and effort to kind of respond to queries and work through this. So actually it's in the interest of everyone to move through and hopefully get the council back to a point where they're focused on the 1 year of accounts and they don't have audit, because we've been auditing consistently for quite a long time, and actually it's very tiring and draining for both teams. So I think it's good for the council to kind of reflect solely that the finance function is much more than just audit, and obviously that would then help everyone in terms of just being able to kind of do the roles they're intended to do, but also importantly give us some breathing space in terms of both teams to kind of work through the audit in a kind of sort of staggered way, as which we'd probably normally see as part of a normal audit cycle. I don't know if Mark wants to add anything to that.
Thank you, Mark. Would you?
Yeah, I'd certainly would echo that. We've certainly, I'm going to touch it on my next agenda item, but I'll just mention it now, really. So both teams have worked really hard and continue to do so. They are consistent teams and experienced teams. So we've got the same staffing personnel on both sides of the team. Us and external auditors continued, and the benefit of doing that has been really, really good, and it's to our advantage that continues and will continue looking forward as well. Yet we are on a catch-up. That is a much shortened period as we come through to 2021. The national picture is somewhat challenged, so we're waiting on some instructions, some guidance from DLUC, which isn't out yet, but will frame where the whole local government, English local government audit sector is, and there are some challenges across the entire workforces nationally. And we're just waiting for that updated guidance on what our approach is for preparing the accounts and getting the audit assurances that are needed looking forward as well. But that said, we're in a good, stable, consistent and improving trajectory.
Thank you very much. Darren Carter.
Yeah, so in June this year, there was a parliamentary committee published a report about the backlog in local government audits. So this was dated the 23rd of June. And at that point, they said that only 12% of local authorities had concluded their 21-22 audits within deadlines. And at that point, there were over 400 local authorities who were behind on getting the audits completed. So we're part of a very large number of local authorities now, but as Adrian said, what we're hoping to do is not just catch up, but to overtake. So.
Thank you very much. Oh yes, Councillor Gittings.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to say, I think I raised this at the last meeting. I think we naturally do, because as we know, there's been considerably adverse publicity over a number of years about us catching up with the accounts and how much it's all cost. But would it be true to say that now we've essentially, we've learned lessons, we've streamlined our process, we've got dedicated teams in place, that hopefully, I hope the word going forward, but I'm going to say it, going forward, that will mean that our costs can at least be streamlined or in line or better than other councils, because we've got good teams in place, and I feel like we've sharpened up our act, which is what this committee looks for you to do, and what obviously the public expect, because it is public money.
The short answer is yes, but the public sector audit appointments body oversees the appointment of external auditors to local government. They wrote to me, to all local authority section 151 officers a couple of weeks ago, suggesting that as part of the latest procurement, audit fees would be increasing by 151%. Compared to the previous round. That is not specific to Reading, I hasten to add, that is every local authority in the country. They are proposing a 151% increase in order to address the lack of a market in terms of audit firms wanting to do this work.
So my question was going to be why, but it's lack of a market. I'm slightly puzzled, but
yeah. The local authority FDs groups are always the most entertaining emails to receive, but the day that letter came out, there were quite a few entertaining emails shared around, but I won't go into more detail.
We might expect more detail on that. It's an eye-watering increase in cost. It really is. We might expect some more detail on that in future reports to this committee as they come through. It's an astonishing rise, really, 151%. But are we happy now then, because we may be straying onto the next agenda item already, but are we happy to thank EY for their update and note the report? Yeah, everyone, not just nodding. Yes, Chair. Thank you very much. Thank you to EY, and I presume you're going to leave us now rather than, or are you intending to hang on?
I'll stay on for the next couple of sections because they're relevant for the audit. So it's just in case anybody has any questions, but I'll just hang on for the next couple of agenda items, Chair, if that's okay. Perfect.
Of course, that's okay. Thank you very much indeed. Right. Item 5, which we've already touched on, is the closing financial accounts update. This is from our Chief Accountant, Mark. And yeah, would you like to say a few words of introduction?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think much of this report has been covered in the discussion so far tonight, but this is a formal request to note the update, which we've heard. I'll add slightly to that in just a moment, and to formally ask if you would approve delegated authority to Chair and to Darren Carter as 151 officer to sign off the accounts at the conclusion of the audit. In terms of the updates, the only remaining matter I think just that I would just confirm is that we are well underway on the 21-22 accounts, the next year's set of accounts, and we're looking to publish those sometime over the next 4 to 6 weeks. We will take on board any adjustments that are remaining from the work from the current year. As committee will know, any adjustments that arise during the audit field work, we will make those adjustments for the purpose of accuracy in our financial reporting. So that said, that remaining piece of work and the adjustments that we would still put through, any of those we would, as that would be new information from what you've already seen so far, Chair, In signing off the delegation to sign off the accounts, finally, we will go through all those further amendments if there are any indeed with you. So at that point, I'll stop.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we're asked to note the progress, which is excellent. But yeah, just to underline the fact that this is the last meeting before these accounts are signed off. So this is the approval for Darren as Director of Finance and myself as Chair to sign off on the 2021 accounts, which we've just heard will hopefully be before Christmas. It better be before the next meeting, which is January. Otherwise, this delegated authority is a waste of time. And I'm sure they will be, because we've just heard they will be. As a brief note, I think the costs that we mentioned associated with the 1920 audit are still under discussion, and they'll be reported to this committee in due course. So does anyone have any comments or questions on this? And is everyone happy to note the report and give us that delegated authority to sign off? Perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to our finance team. As we've thanked DY, we definitely thank our officers who are obviously working very hard behind the scenes on this. So thank you. That was item 5. Item 6, going concern assessment, which yeah, I've been wrangling with for a while, but
you got your way in the end, Chair.
I'm going to try and introduce this and then I'll hand over to Darren. So with each set of accounts, our officers are going to provide us as members with a going concern assessment that they have made and with some of the evidence they're using to support that assessment. So the next report is going to detail how our officers have come to their conclusions. They also provide that to EY. But EY will be asking this committee through me to sign off how we have satisfied ourselves that the going concern conclusion has been reached. And this report is designed to do that for us as members. If any of that sounds like nonsense, please ask. I had to ask maybe 100 times. Darren's getting really fed up with it now. So we're going to go over to Darren. Maybe you could define what going concern means for a local authority and then how you have come to your assessment. Thank you.
Yes, so essentially all local authority accounts are prepared on the basis that the local authority preparing those accounts is a going concern. And effectively, that's a judgment that we've got enough cash and enough money to be able to continue operating for at least a further 12 months. That's essentially the judgment. Of course, the fact that we're doing this assessment for the 2021 accounts, well, we already know we've continued operating for a further 12 months beyond then, but we still need to do the assessment in order to evidence our position. So this report sets out the sort of things that we take account of when we're doing that assessment. I'm not going to go through all of them. Most of it is publicly available information. It includes information from the outturn report and the budget report and my CFO report that I write alongside the budget report. But as we know, Reading Borough Council is still financially stable, and even if we weren't, we would still be preparing. Those authorities are issuing Section 114 notices, are still preparing their accounts on a going concern basis, because they will work with DLUC and central government in order to be able to continue operating as a local authority. So it's, while this is important in order to show the process we go through, you might assume that if we were issuing a 114, then we wouldn't be able to rely on this going concern, but you do. So yeah, we've set out all of the assessments. This goes in my name. I have to say Stuart does all of the work. He's the one who goes back and forth with Adrian on this, and we have to keep this updated throughout the audit process because it needs to be current at the point where the audit is concluding in order for it to be relevant for EY to do their checks to make sure that they agree with the assessment that we've made. So I said, I'm not going to go through the detail of the report, but he sets out the process and the reason why we believe that we are a going concern.
Thank you very much. We've all read the report. Members, do we have any questions or comments? Councillor Emberson.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if you could just talk to the reserve levels that are noted in the report. I mean, they're quite a decent level, but I just wondered on the earmarked reserves, whether you could kind of elaborate on what they are made up of, just because I know that nearly 90% are earmarked, and it would just be helpful, I think, for the committee to understand what they're earmarked against and why we do that as an authority.
Yeah. So one thing to recall is that back in 2017, we received a statutory notice from EY saying that our level of reserves were getting worryingly low. At that point, there was a risk that the overspends and the inability to balance the budget would be greater than the level of reserves that we had as a council. That position has completely changed over the last few years. There is now SIPFA produce a resilience index that shows how every authority sits in terms of their level of reserves. And I did an extract of that in my CFO report that went alongside the budget report back in February. But essentially what it shows is that if you map every unitary authority in the country and show the level of reserves compared to the financial size of the authority, we are almost exactly in the middle now. So we're not at the low end, we're equally not at the very healthy end, but being smack in the middle compared to where we were 6 years ago is really good. Now, in terms of what those reserves are, we maintain a general fund reserve balance equivalent to 5% of the net revenue expenditure of the authority. And at the moment, that is the £8.2 million that we've got in there. Now, the rest of the earmark reserves are a combination of lots of different things. So it will include grants that we've received, which don't have any conditions attached, so they're not repayable, but they haven't yet been spent. So we record the income in the accounts in the year we receive it, and then we put that money into reserve until it's spent. We've also got things like the public health grants, where we're required to put that into an earmark reserve, any surplus or deficit on that. We've then got lots of different reserves that, see, one of my responsibilities as 151 officer is to make an assessment of the key financial risks for the council and to make sure that we have made adequate provision in the reserves to meet those risks. So if we think about a few years back, we had a lot of equal pay claims that we were dealing with. So we had a specific reserve to deal with those equal pay claims. They've now flown through the system, touch wood. But those are the sort of things that you need to make an assessment of the level of risk as a council and make sure that you've earmarked a specific reserve for those. On top of that, we've currently got earmarked reserves for transformation work. So in order to undertake transformation activity in the authority, essentially to cover the costs of delivering big capital projects where you can't capitalise all of the expenditure. So we've got a specific reserve for that. We've got a capital financing smoothing reserve set up. We've got a collection fund reserve set up to smooth surpluses and deficits on the collection fund. So the full list of all of the reserves is attached to my report that I take alongside the budget report, but those are the sort of things that are included within that number. So I understand that to some people, the idea that we got £78 million in reserves sounds like a big figure, but for an authority of our size, it's about where it should be. My gut feel is that a lot of authorities will be using those reserves in the coming years in order to balance the budget, and we'll see a big reduction in those numbers. But that's why they're there, in order to give you a buffer to be able to manage fluctuations in spend.
Thank you. Any other questions? No, I'm not saying anything. I wondered why we didn't also have going concern assessments for all the group companies there, Reading Buses, Bright Futures and so on, but Darren has patiently explained again that the financial position of all the companies owned by RBC is already integrated into the figures and any risks are already built in.
Yes.
So I needn't worry. Members, are we happy to note the report and the assessment made? We are. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to officers for explaining that. We go on to item 7, the Internal Audit Quarterly Report. That contains within it one restricted appendix, which refers to, with some additional detail, the fuel system report. If members want to discuss the specific details in that appendix, then I suggest we move this item to the end of the agenda so we can close the online meeting, ensure the room is empty, and talk with officers in a closed session. And I'm happy to do that if anyone wants, but members might feel that they can discuss this item without referring to the specific detail because the broad issues are already outlined very clearly in the public report. Does anyone want to discuss this in closed session? No, I'm happy not to as well. We've been provided with that additional detail, so we know what it is, but I don't think we need to discuss it. Thank you. Oh, remember, if we do change our minds and someone wishes to discuss it, just let us know and we can still do that. So I'll hand over to our Chief Auditor, Paul Harrington, for an introduction, if we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is my standard quarterly report, which just gives you an update of those audits completed in Q2 of this financial year. As ever, the detail is in the attached appendix, Appendix 1. We completed a total of 5 audits during this period, 3 receiving a positive opinion and 2 receiving a negative opinion. So if you go to page 104, that just gives you an explanation of the various audit opinions. They're colour coded. So if it's substantial, it's a sound system of governance, internal control. If it's reasonable, they're generally sound system. If it's limited, we've got significant gaps and weaknesses, and if it's no assurance, immediate action is required to address the fundamental gaps. So as I say, the details in the appendix, so I'm going to quickly, very quickly skim through. So in terms of the positive opinions, council tax concluded that controls in place to ensure council tax bills are correctly calculated, appropriately set up, payments are collected, accounted for and monitored, and all the appropriate reconciliations are performed and evidenced. In terms of the reasonable assurance opinions, the staff leaver process, so we concluded that the leaver process has been automated to facilitate the timely closure of employees' pay, but we did have issues in terms of the complete return of corporate equipment. When I talk about corporate equipment, that's laptops, mobile phones, etc., closure of system access, and also identification cards. A lot of reliance is placed on the manager to notify the IT service, but they are forever playing catch up in terms of getting this equipment reserved. So there are improvements to be made in that area, but generally it's okay. Adult social care debt. So over the years, we look at the debt of the council, but in this year, we've looked specifically at adult social care debt. As at the 30th of June, there was 5.8 million in terms of adult social care debt, but our audit did identify and evidence significant progress, particularly in terms of comprehensive and well understood documented procedures covering a range of system areas and enhanced governance processes, including detailed reporting and analysis to support the adult social care debt monitoring and recovery. There's been a lot of hard work done in that area, so that's now moved from a previous limited assurance now to a reasonable assurance opinion. So we're flagging improvements in those areas. In terms of limited assurance, we've got payments to adult social care providers. So those of you who are on this committee 18 months, 2 years ago, we had a provider who was accidentally overpaid to the value of about £1 million. And we also had a number of complaints in terms of the promptness of payments made. That was given no assurance at the time. It's moved up to limited, so there's a lot of progress taking place, but there's still a considerable amount of work in progress. So we can't move it out of the limited assurance assessment at the moment. And in terms of no assurance, that's the fuel system, where we concluded that systems and procedures for securing and accounting for fuel were found to be weak, and we couldn't provide any assurance that the control environment is sufficient to safeguard the council against loss, theft for running out of fuel. So on pages 110 to 111, that just gives you an update of where we are with the audit plan in terms of what we've done and what we plan to do for the remainder of the year. We are slightly behind the plan at this moment in time, so we are playing catch up a bit. And then page 112 just gives you a breakdown of the type of investigations that the corporate investigations teams have been undertaken. Thank you. Any questions?
Members, as always, we're asked to consider the report. 5 reviews, 3 positive, 2 negative. Any comments, thoughts or questions? Nothing immediately. Oh no, yes, Councillor Thompson.
No, actually, thank you, Chair. It's just a comment and looking and particularly something sensitive, but clearly a lot of work went into sorting out the fuel issue. And you know, actually, it was interesting seeing the level of detail that was given as well. So thank you. It was appreciated, both for the work and also for the explanation of it. Yeah.
Thank you. No, it's always worth stopping to thank the audit team for their work. I've got a quick question, if I might do. We've got one area of review. I think you've already answered this partly in your introduction, so I apologise. Adult social care debt, which has got 6 recommendations spread over red and amber, but comes up with a reasonable assurance. So I wonder if you could just say a couple of words about the correlation or otherwise between the recommendations and the assurance rating, because I think if a resident just picked this up and had a look, they'd be like, well, hang on, red and amber, but you say it's reasonable. So just briefly, if you could just explain that.
That's a fair question and a very good question. So usually with that number of recommendations, certainly if we're making a priority 1, it would drop into the limited category. But we felt we had to recognise the sheer amount of work that has been done in that area in terms of strengthening control, strengthening governance arrangements, and the steps that are being made to prevent the debt, debt avoidance before it comes into the system. So we thought that we did. It was borderline. It was very much borderline, but we've gone with reasonable.
Thank you very much. Well, I don't have any great thoughts. I don't see any other indications at the moment. As always, these are really clear and detailed reports. I think we thank Internal Audit for their work. I think we are going to want to see the key recommendations following through on the audit tracker. Who am I staring at? Audit tracker on the next agenda in January. So we'll see those coming through. So are we all happy? So yes, thank Internal Audit and that we have considered the report. Yes, everyone's nodding. Thank you very much. That moves us to item 8. So this is a direct result of internal audit recommendations because we now have a specific follow-up on previous recommendations around direct payments. And we're very grateful to have a report in front of us and an officer to speak to us. This was suggested a few meetings ago now by Councillor Terry, I think, who's no longer on this committee, but the other members are going to be very interested and have questions and comments, I'm sure. Who am I looking at to introduce? Right, Chris Greenway, is that right? Thank you very much for coming along. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the attached report provides an update to the committee on the actions taken in adult social care to address the process concerns identified in the audit report on direct payments from December 22. The report identified 8 key recommendations under 3 themes. 5 out of those 8 recommendations have been complete when the actions taken to address those concerns. And the other 3, we have target dates over the next 4 months to complete those 8 recommendations in total. Those recommendations have included a complete review of our processes, policies and procedures. We've also looked at our structures. So we've set up a specific DP function that separates the duties from setup and payments, which again was a key sort of recommendation. And we're also doing a wider review of our commissioning structures to look at, again, how we can strengthen the capacity in that area. So a lot of work has been undertaken by officers. We've also done a complete review of the surplus balances Now in 2022, obviously coming out of the pandemic, there were significant surpluses identified in that year. A number of people had stopped some of their services and suspended going to things like day services. So again, there was a considerable increase in surplus, but that has now been more systematically reviewed. We also get electronic reporting now from the two main providers, our prepaid cards, to allow us to look at live balance totals on a regular basis, to ensure that again any exceptional surpluses are reviewed by our operational teams as well, to ensure that people's needs are being met. Happy to take any further questions on the
Thank you
other
very
actions.
much. Thank you. Members, Councillor Gittings.
Yeah, I mean, name's on the report as well, but as I understand it, there wasn't a recommendation for extra resource to be added in terms of staffing, because I think, you know, leading back to some of the other reports, that clearly, you know, there's a lot of work going on in this area with the team, and they needed some extra work. So as I understand it, we are going to get some extra resource. Is that clear?
That is fair. Yep.
So how many how many staff members?
I think it's about 1.3. I mean, we're not talking about substantial numbers. I mean, again, we only have 259 direct payment service users. The majority of those, 90% of those, are managed prepaid accounts. So you know, this will create the new payment function that will do the monitoring of those accounts.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's relevant to the report, but it was mentioned, there was a reference in the report to a workforce review. I just wondered if anyone could explain a bit more, that would be what that is.
Again, that's the commissioning restructure review that we're undertaking, have done over the 7 months. So again, that whole sort of area of finance, as you said earlier, sort of the provider payment side of things as well. We're trying to strengthen that, financial assessments. So again, we're using the market sustainability grants that we've been given to add some additional capacity in all of those areas. So it's part of that workforce review.
Thank you. Can't see any more hands in the air. Thank you very much. I think obviously we're very pleased to see completed against most of those actions, so that's fantastic. And to see all the others, I think skimming through, all the others will be completed before our next meeting at the end of January, so that's fantastic. Just a quick question, which I might have asked before, but about process. These came about from an internal audit review. Will internal audit, might be a question for Mr. Harrington, will internal audit at some point be cycling back round to re-review this area and to check that those recommendations have all been bedded in?
Yes.
Yes. I like these short answers. We'll take that as a yes. No. Yeah, yes is enough. So at some point that will occur. So yeah, we'll see all. We'll see all of those completed on the tracker when we see that in January. So thank you very much indeed, and thank you for coming in. Members, are we happy that we've noted the action and have no further questions? Perfect. Thank you very much. Right, we'll move on to item 9, I think. I'll just click on my iPad. Yep. We've got the SIPFA guidance on audit committees, which is what we are, and the new terms of reference. This has been to policy committee, and that committee, which some of you are on, recommended it go to full council in October for discussion and final decision on adopting the new terms of reference. This report comes to us from Paul again. Yeah, perhaps we could ask him to introduce it for us.
Thank you, Chair. So just for some background, then SIPFA published guidance for audit committees roughly every 5 years, once every 5 years. The last guidance was in 2018. So this guidance was published at the beginning of the year, and it's really in response to recommendations made following the Redmond review. If you haven't heard of the Redmond review, it was an independent review by Sir Tony Redmond into the effectiveness of external audit and transparency of financial reporting in local authorities. His report was published in September 2020. The government then subsequently responded to it, and this has resulted in this SIPFA, its guidance for audit committees. So whilst it is guidance, SIPFA expects that all local authorities should make their best efforts to adopt the principles aiming for effective audit committee arrangements. So although the detail of the guidance is provided in section 2 of the report, some of the more noteworthy changes are summarised in the executive summary under paragraph 1.6, and I'll just quickly go through those. So SIPFA recommends that the audit committee is an advisory committee and does not have delegated powers such as the approval of financial statements. The role of the committee is to review the financial statements prior to approval, and the statements are responsibility of those charged with governance. So that will be council. SIPFA also recommends that each audit committee should include at least 2 co-opted independent members to provide appropriate technical expertise. SIPFA has endorsed the recommendations of the Redmond Review that the external audit annual report should be submitted to full council by the external auditor. The committee size should be no more than 8 members. And SIPFA recommends that the use of substitutes on the committee is avoided. The audit committee should have oversight of counter-fraud arrangements to be able to judge whether the authority's arrangements are fit for purpose. The committee may wish to review the effectiveness of whistleblowing arrangements. Tasks such as budget monitoring should not be undertaken by the committee. As an advisory committee to those charged with governance, the committee should be regularly held to account by full council. The committee report annually on how it has complied with the SIPFA position statement. And SIPFA has produced a model terms of reference, which was approved by policy committee in July and will be recommended to council, as the chair says, in October. So what we did as part of the guidance is we did a self-assessment. So we used a SIPFA sort of pro forma. We did a self-assessment in terms of where we're at. We're pretty much bang down the middle, which is where I would expect us to be, and which is where I would expect the majority of local authorities to be, because it is new guidance. One of the areas we do need to address was the terms of reference. That doesn't mean to say that we're not doing what an audit committee should be doing, because we are. It's just it's not formally recognised in our existing terms of reference. So when the new terms of reference are approved, it probably won't make a lot of difference to what this committee does. It's just getting that in black and white and approved. So there are recommendations which will be taken to council next month, and that's that they agree the new terms of reference and the removal of this committee's decision-making powers in relation to the approval of the annual financial statements, returning the later to full council. We will be asking council to endorse the recommendations of the Redmond Review that the external audit annual report should be submitted to full council by the external auditor. And we'll also be asking that the Audit and Governance Committee reports annually to council on how it has complied with the SIPFA position statement, discharged its responsibilities, and includes an assessment of its performance. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Yep, we're asked to note the guidance, terms of reference, and the other details in the report. Councillor Yeo.
Thank you. So there's a question in sort of I've got on point 2.4, where I mean some of this you sort of just covered, but there's one thing that you didn't, which is the suggested length of tenure. Now, some local authorities elect all out every 4 years, so it would be natural that meant, I presume, that would be 2 4-year terms. Reading doesn't do that. We had all outs last year, so some of us, myself for instance as an example, but there are others, I've only just joined the committee, but I'm up for election this year because I only got 2 years. So would that mean that I would, for instance, do a year, then I get 4 years, and that is my term up, or do I get 9 years, or do I have to come off after I've reached 8 years, or is the tenure actually 2 years? Is it 1 year each, sort of thing? I'd just like some clarity, really, because does that make any sense? I can see Michael's nodding but it's just a little bit of sort of, because the other thing is, if that was the case, the part of this is us as lay people, we're not auditors, most of us aren't accountants, etc., is gaining the sort of understanding of what these reports are, what it is that we're really querying, and then we're off because we've actually gained some expertise. So I would have concerns about that. And I think the politics of Reading means that none of us is entirely, going to be sitting here for forever anyway. So, I just thought it was worth making an observation.
No, you're quite right. It sounded like you were volunteering for 9 years on this committee.
No, not at all.
Yeah, we'll minute that.
Well,
but it's a perfectly valid question, because people come on a committee, and I think that what we're looking at is what Mr. Arrington referred to as guidance that we should use in our best way. But I think he should respond rather than me. So over to you.
It's a really good question, but as you say, Chair, it is guidance. So, and I think the guidance whether suggests that 2 full terms, I think they're meaning 2 years. So there's some continuity on the committee, but sometimes that isn't possible or practical. And it's one of those situations where one size doesn't fit all. So, but yeah, it is guidance. But I think they're looking to try and embed some continuity on all audit committees. That's what they would look for anyway.
I think the political groups that make up Reading Borough Council and this committee are also happy that members stay on this committee for a while in order to learn the ropes. I think we're fairly agreed on continuity, but people have to come in and out as well, because without a fresh pair of eyes, it's possible we'll all get a bit tired. So a new member is also very welcome. 9 years, settle in. I think there's some other questions. I think the guidance suggests that we shouldn't have lead members on, but those are for councils which run an entirely different system and don't have the committee system that we do. So again, it's guidance that we should look at but use if we wish. The possibility of including 2 co-opted independent members is interesting. I don't know if members have views on that. I think it would be a difficult task, but it would also potentially reduce this committee by 2 elected members, because we would be looking at keeping it at 8. So there's question marks over a lot of it, and we should look to follow the guidance where it applies best to us, I imagine. One of the things I think, and I agree with our chief auditor, I think the terms of reference will only slightly change the way we do things on the committee, but I think it will slightly change the way we do things. I think looking at it, it could lead to increased workload coming through this committee, increased numbers of reports, increased areas to look at. I can't remember, what did I write down? We'll be looking at the governance arrangements for our significant partnerships, for example, Brighter Futures, Reading Buses, GLL maybe, with leisure. And we'll be providing a report into full council. We'll be benchmarking where we are each year, that kind of thing. All of those reports will be coming through. And I guess what I'd like to raise is this is a big agenda this evening. If you imagine it with additional reports based on the slight changes through the terms of reference, I question whether we'll all, what do I question? Will we have the time to give proper due diligence to each and every one of those reports? Oh, Councillor Yo, yeah, if anyone has any thoughts.
Yeah, just going back to the co-opted members, I mean, I'm not in favour of co-opting people to think. I think, we're a democracy, we elect people, and actually we've got each of the 4 parties on the committee. And the democracy sort of aspect of it is that if we, as say the Labour group, if the voters don't like us, then they've got every right to kick us off. So that's that's the sort of scrutiny aspect to that. And then there's the question of how do you choose this person, or who chooses them? Do we end up voting on them? You know, that would be, we might as well elect people. I mean, it doesn't. I can understand why SITFA have come up with that, but it's you have a system or you don't. I don't think mixing it would be a great idea personally. But.
As it happens, I agree with you. However, my only caveat would be that I understand other local authorities have succeeded in bringing independent members on. They may be able to give us, in theory, the accountancy knowledge that perhaps as democratically elected members we lack, and put a financial eye that we may lack. But the weather's changed. And whilst I agree with you, but we should note that other local authorities have succeeded. So it's still a question mark, I think. We'll see if agendas get larger. We need to consider whether we're doing each and every item the best of our ability. Are there any more questions or comments at all on this? No, I'm not saying anything. We have the facility, if we really wanted to send a note to full council, because it will debate and decide these. We are the committee that it will be changing, but I don't think we've come up with anything that we need to advise full council. And if anyone has any thoughts, we'll all be able to speak at that meeting, and those on policy will have then debated it 3 times. I know, lucky. Okay, so there are question marks about how guidance is implemented for the best in Reading, but the terms of reference will be updated in October. So our January meeting will, as I understand it, be under those new terms of reference. Actually, I might look at Michael. Is that they'll be immediately implemented? They will. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Are we happy to note that report? Nods all round. Thank you very much. Item 10 is contract procedure rules, and that's a review of those from Jonathan Hopkins. Jonathan, could you introduce yourself, hello at the back, to members and give us a brief introduction to the report?
I will.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for the slot on the agenda and for your time. I'm Jonathan Hopkins, AD for contracts and procurement, or procurement and contracts actually. Been here for just over a year now, or just coming up to a year now. First thing I looked at when I got here, as you would, are the rules for undertaking procurement in a public organisation. These are the rules, the contract procedure rules. Apologies for the dourness of the report. It's not very easy to make this interesting. As a public body, we have to follow rules for undertaking our procurement activity. The rules are set in legislation, so they are well, it is the law, but they're called the regulations. In looking at the rules that we had, I thought of making a couple of refinements, and positively, colleagues throughout the organisation, when I introduced myself to them and visited them as I joined, welcomed those changes. Really, they were changes to make the document a little bit more accessible. And to provide a little bit of clarity on a number of areas. So, for example, what we did was reorder the rules in order that they flow for if you're actually undertaking a procurement. So if you're halfway through a procurement exercise, you can look halfway through the rules, and that'll actually help you to find it, to navigate your way. We also put an index on the front, which provides some guidance to people in that regard. I think some of the other things that I'll highlight in terms of undertaking procurement, there is the law that you have to follow. These rules now state that as the what you actually have to do. The how you have to do it, we've actually taken a little bit of that out, and we intend making that as the supplementary guidance in the manual. The reason for that is the previous version had a little bit of the what and the how in there, and people found that a little bit confusing. Whereas now, if people want to know what the law says, it's in here. If people want to know how to actually apply the law, that will be supplemented in the manual. And there's 2 benefits for that. Number one is that in pulling the manual together, we're working with colleagues throughout the organisation to take their views into account. Second of all, the procurement legislation is actually changing next year as a result of us leaving the European Union, and designing it this way, it makes it a little bit easier for us to actually adapt the how to what's coming out of those rules, of that legislation. So that's the fundamental, but the basics in terms of the principles of competition, the need to demonstrate value for money, the need to keep your contracts organised in order that you can tell people externally what's coming up, all that remains. So thank you for the time. Happy to answer any questions, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, members were asked to consider the updates and recommend them on to full council for adoption. Any comments, questions, thoughts? Yes, Councillor Gittings.
You mentioned your, and I actually chaired a conference in Loughborough a couple of years ago now, and a lawyer got up and was talking. In his view, one of the benefits of leaving the European Union, we might have disagreements over that, was the fact that it will make procurement easier. So you did mention it. And so will it make it easier, and how is it affected in council terms?
Okay, the intention of the UK government in bringing in the legislation, the separate legislation, is to make it easier. And to be fair, we started to see some of that. When we say make it easier, what we're talking about is make it less bureaucratic, less paperwork. If you're going out to tender, rather than having a 60-page document for tenders to try to work out, it's a shorter document, and it's in plain English. There's also the transparency side of it, in that at the moment, lots of companies or suppliers out there, the first they know that we're actually going out for something is when they see the tender document. This new legislation will require us, although we were heading this way anyway, to publish a 5-year forward plan of all of our contracts. So that plan out there will make it easier for suppliers and contractors, whether it's private sector or social enterprises, etc., to actually plan to put bids together for these contracts to work together and so forth. And there's also the requirement there are also, additional aspects that have been introduced, so that whereas under the European legislation, you weren't allowed to break down your big requirements into smaller lots, now you can, under controlled circumstances, if the intention is to support local SMEs or social enterprises or organisations who are trying to set themselves up. So to be fair, there is a lot of that in there from central government, and as we're designing it, we are looking to reduce the complexity of our own documents to have one standard set of documents, so that you don't have a supplier dealing with two parts of the council having two sets of documents. They will have one set of documents. And the final thing I'll say on that, I suppose, is that if there are policy objectives that the council has, whether it's a climate agenda or social value, etc., we're producing an intervention stage in our processes to actually ensure that we can actually incorporate those policy objectives into our contract activity.
So I can't.
Sorry, that's a bit of a complicated answer.
Well, no,
to a simple
so
question.
In theory, so social value we could mean that local companies, smaller SMEs, can bid for our contracts, where before it may have been a bit harder.
Yes, yeah. I should have said it like that. That's the simple answer in terms of what we're trying to achieve through this. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other? Oh yes, Councillor McGoldrick.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that very detailed report and also very comprehensive answers. Really appreciated. On specifically the point about SMEs and sort of breaking up tenders, will we be able to get those numbers back, and is that something you're going to be regularly reporting on? Because I think that would be something of interest to both councillors and also I think residents as well. It'd be good if we could get that data and share that to show what we're doing for local businesses.
Short answer, as Dan said, yes, it is. We have difficulty in obtaining that data at the moment. We can do it, but it takes a little bit of work. So by changing the way that we approach here and by changing our database system, then we will be able to have that information readily accessible. And also, we want to tailor it towards the policy objectives of the authority, so we can specifically focus on the things that are of interest to yourselves and CMT. So yes, we can. Yes, we will.
Thank you. Any other hands in the air? No, not at the moment. Thank you very much. I don't have any great thoughts from the chair, which won't surprise you. In fact, over the summer, Jonathan was kind enough to explain what procurement was to me and exactly what falls under it and what doesn't. And so it's fair to say I'm learning in this area. But also, I think, as I understand it, we've got a scheduled high-level internal audit review of the procurement process coming up in the near future. So we'll receive a report back from internal audit on that as well. So that will complement this. I'm very happy that this review has been undertaken. The answers are very positive. I'm grateful to have had sight of it, and I trust our officers who've drafted it. So are we happy that we've considered the updates and that we recommend they go towards full council? Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, item 11, the strategic risk register, with an introduction from Robin. Sorry. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. So the report and the accompanying risk cards looks at the strategic risks that the council has identified and has been managing to date and those going forward. The first thing you may notice from the last meeting is we have reorganised the way the risk cards look. You recall that there was some confusion, not least amongst myself, thank you, Councillor, yeah, of what some of the descriptors meant. So we've split the actions into those controls that are in place, up and running, and those that still require action. Each one of those, the actions which are required, you'll see that there's a date for completion and a status. So when it says it's in progress, it's rolling. If it hadn't been started, we'll put it hasn't been started. So I hope that you find this this format more clear. I do, at least. Thank you. You'll note that there are still the same 11 strategic risks as previous. However, whilst we have 3 of the existing red risks as before, those being risk of loss from cyber attack, lack of local special education needs and disabilities, placement provision, SEND, and failure to safeguard vulnerable adults and children, you'll notice that 2 of the 11 risks have now moved up into red risks. The first one, page 12 on the risk cards, failure to deliver zero carbon commitments. I mean, this is quite simply due for waiting to hear back from a capital bid for the electrification of the remainder of the fleet and decarbonisation of our council buildings, corporate buildings. So we're waiting for approval or decision on that. The second risk, which has gone up to red, unable to deliver a balanced budget as a result. The broad explanation, I think Darren Carter will be able to add more if you wish, as a result of the cost of living increases, demand pressures, and achieving some income targets. You will also note in the report that we're continuing training for our managers and service managers, and I can advise that we'll now be integrating risk management within service plans. We're working out how to integrate that with our WYSI computer system. Means it'll probably fall over. Shouldn't say that. And as a gentle reminder, you'll note members training for those new members, of those who haven't attended already. We have risk management training on the 21st of November. Thank you. Anybody has any questions?
Thank you very much indeed. Members, any thoughts or questions, comments? Yeah, Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a comment about the new layout, and it's quite positive. Thank you very much. I noticed straight away that the layout was significantly easier to read. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any others? No, I agree. We've got more information, which sometimes feels like an overload, but as soon as I started to read through them, it seemed the presentation was a lot clearer. So thank you very much indeed for spending time changing the format. I don't know if I've got any particularly good thoughts again from the chair, but as I was reading through these, it felt like a lot of these risks are entirely intertwined. Failure to deliver a budget means failure to deliver zero carbon commitments, perhaps. Or failure to tackle inequality. Failure to recruit staff means we'll fail to deliver a budget. I mean, they're all interconnected with one another. And I wondered how that was, if at all, that was represented or should be represented within these. Or maybe this is just a random thought that occurred to me when reading your very detailed slide deck. But the way they all seem to be reliant on each other struck me as something of a complicated house of cards risk. Anyway, put that in your mind for a moment. They are more clearly defined, I think. It's much clearer what the mitigations are that have been taken and what the ones that are planned to be taken. I don't see any other hands. And we've asked for a report on cyber security, so we're going to get a little bit more of an in-depth look into that one, maybe at the January meeting. So yeah, I wondered whether you had thoughts on the interconnectedness of all things.
You're absolutely right. They are one interacts with the other. I think to probably overuse a well-used phrase is that how do you eat an elephant? And I think it's such a complex soup, minestrone of risks, shall we say. I think the only way of breaking it down is to break it down into its component parts. At least you can see the tree for the woods, which is back to front the way it's normally said. But you're absolutely right. They all interact with each other. So the recruitment and retention, very expensive interim staff and so on to try and get the work done, which are obviously if you don't have staff, it affects the safeguarding and so on and so forth, as you eloquently described. But it's simply just to try and break that complex mix down into its elements.
Thank you very much. Well, I think we've all read the improved format. We don't seem to have any other questions at the moment. So thank you for bringing this to us. There's lots of detail. There's lots of assessment in there. Are members happy to agree the action? Yes, some nods, some waves, and an agreed. We'll take that. Thank you very much indeed for that. Item 12, we move on, is the Treasury Management Review for Q1. I think this is coming to us because SIPFA now recommends members be updated on a quarterly basis, because I think we used to have this annually. Who do I have? Oh, I didn't note down who was going to.
It's me, Chair.
Stuart. Thank you, Stuart. Would you introduce this for us?
Of course, thank you. So you've stolen part of my introduction,
oh, no.
Chair. So the purpose of this report is to update the committee on the Council's Treasury Management activities for the quarter ended 30th of June 2023. The committee will be used to receiving a mid-year report in January and an outturn report in July in respect to Treasury Management. But as you said, the SIPFA Prudential Code now requires quarterly reporting on these matters from April 2023, and therefore this report fulfills those new requirements. In terms of interest rates, the Bank of England raised interest rates twice during this period, up to 5%. And then subsequently and outside of the reporting period, a further increase to 5.25% was made in August. Although a further increase to 5.5% was widely anticipated in September, and the report does mention that, likely due to announcement earlier that week in respect of a fall of inflation, the bank rate was actually retained at 5.25%. The Council remains significantly under borrowed against its capital financing requirement, and we're continuing to follow the approved borrowing strategy in terms of deferring any potential long-term borrowing whilst interest rates remain at those current levels, and we will utilise short and temporary borrowing as required. Council continues to operate within all of its treasury indicators and none of those were breached during this period. And finally, I'd like to update the committee that during September, the council repaid a further 2 lender option borrower option loans, also known as LOBOs, totaling £10 million. This will be formally included in the mid-year report in January, but effectively leaves us with 10 million of LOBOs left, of which one of them is actually has been converted into a fixed rate loan. So we've only actually got 1 LOBO left, totaling £5 million. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, do we have any questions or comments or thoughts? We do not. I don't have much to add, but I wondered if do members feel comfortable with this information? That there is a training session that can be arranged on treasury management. Some of us have done it before. I can't remember how many of us. Would anyone welcome either doing that training course if they're new and haven't done it before, or as a refresher if they have done it before? There's a bit, oh gosh, don't never put your hand up for training courses. That's a terrible, terrible mistake. From my memory, it was a perfectly good and enjoyable and valid training course that helped me understand this. So we do have some potential interest. So is that already scheduled in, or is that something that we could schedule in? We could. Time is precious for officers and councillors alike, so I hate to add to the burden, but some training courses are worth doing. If we're receiving this, we're going to be receiving this every meeting from now on. Thanks to SIPFA. So it would serve us well to understand what we're receiving to the best of our knowledge. Cool. Well, we'll leave that in the hands of officers then. If you could consider running that training session at some point in the fairly near future. I guess by the end of this civic year would be a good idea, I guess. Would that be okay with members? Are we looking for an evening? Okay. I don't know how quickly that could be run, or whether we could run it around an audit and governance meeting, get it in before or get it in after, but maybe there's some options that we could look at. Yes. That's right, yeah. Right. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, members, are we happy to note and thank Stuart for his report? Perfect. Thank you very much. Item 13 is the Q1 performance and monitoring report. This went to policy earlier in the week, I think, and I imagine it generated very exciting discussion at that committee. SIPFA guidance, which we saw earlier, notes that tasks such as budget monitoring should not be undertaken by the Audit and Governance Committee. But anyway, this, I hope, has been superseded by the going concern assessment which we received from our finance team earlier. So this was on the agenda to give us some confidence around that going concern assessment, and we no longer need that. So hopefully, along with the SIPFA guidance, this will now drop off our agendas. But Darren Carter, is there anything you'd like to say to introduce it? Because it is on our agenda and members may wish to say something this evening.
Yeah, so at policy committee on Monday, I emphasised that we are experiencing significant financial pressures this year. It's not common, not specific to Reading, it's common across the local government sector. Fortunately, we are not in the position of being anywhere near to issuing a Section 114 notice, like a lot of authorities are, but we do need to take action to address the overspends, because it wouldn't take long at this level of overspend for us to start to run into financial difficulties. So we've got a CMT meeting on Tuesday dedicated to tackling the in-year overspend, and we'll be reporting the outcome of that to policy committee in December alongside the Q2 budget monitoring report.
Thank you very much. I think robust and political discussion of that is suited to policy committee, not to audit and governance. But if members do want to say anything, please do. It's on our agenda this evening. No, we're happy to move through. Okay, we're asked to note that report, so we'll note that with nods. Yeah, a couple of nods. And we'll move on to item 14, the new finance system. We've got a progress update from Darren. Mark, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. So tonight says an update to our new finance system, which we are seeking to implement with a target go live date of 1st of November. So that's this 1st of November. So it is very imminent and very real work for the finance team. I'll probably say there's a really good reason why we don't change finance systems every other year. It's a great deal of work that's been ongoing for quite some time. Just to give members assurance on this, our aim is when we clear down our old system, which is Oracle, we will clear that down of all payments. So all payments that have been authorised for suppliers will be paid. There'll be nothing outstanding. So we'll start the new system as afresh. As it stands at the moment, there are no high-level issues that would stop us from going live. Our focus at the moment is on very detailed work around data migration. We're doing a dress rehearsal process at the moment, which we're just concluding. So we've got hundreds of thousands of transactions that we are migrating from the old system to the new system, and thousands of debtors and suppliers, master data processes as well. So our focus at the moment is on data reconciliations, making sure that they are 100% correct, and focusing on our training provision for our existing staff to make sure that we've got processes and people undertaking them looking forward. The report will pick up just very high level what our governance processes. We have daily catch-ups on the programme. We have weekly steering groups, monthly boards. We report into a number of other boards across Reading Borough Council just to make sure that we have our non-finance colleagues, so people in contracting, procurement, IT, we're all aligned to this project and supporting that. So today our focus is on interfaces and setting up standard reporting. That's the focus over the next couple of weeks. Once we go live, we're looking at installing a hypercare process, which will make sure that we've got any, we can quickly respond to any matters of training or any corrections, just to make sure that we can run the processes with due care and attention. And we're looking to have that hypercare process for about 2 to 3 months, just to make sure that we've bedded in the process and we've stabilised all our key functions. The report will just continue to talk about some of our work on remaining work on interfaces, which is one of the key ways that we pass information from our subsidiary systems into our finance system for payments, and key ones being the Mosaic system for our social care payments. So that's the very broad summary for the report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Any questions? Councillor McGoldrick.
Sorry, just a quick one. Thank you, Chair, which relates back to the report that we had earlier about the direct payments. Are you worried that they won't interface with each other very well, or are you quite confident that they won't have any negative impact on the direct payments issue we were discussing earlier?
So I don't think actually direct payments comes through as an explicit feeder system into the existing process. So whatever channels that they're currently operating are going to be replicated into the new. So we have thoroughly tested all of our payment processes, purchase orders and goods receipting, etc. And we have a very detailed layer of budget responsibility and approvals that each directorate has set up under a scheme of delegation to follow. So we're confident that those are right.
Thank you very much. The table lists the Civica, Civica testing planned for September. Has that begun?
It's about to begin over the next week. weeks. So we're just confirming all the necessary coding that needs to be applied into Civica. So in that particular example, we will be updating the Civica system with the new financial codes that we will be using, so that when the daily interfaces come across from Civica, they will be compliant with the new coding structure. So that's planned and in hand. It's shown red in the diagram simply as a status. When that report was drafted, that work hadn't actually started yet, so we were reflecting that is a key piece of work to get right, because we have tens of millions come through that process, because that also picks up all of our banking information as well.
So this is a really important progress update. You're not just doing busy work creating a new system. This is going to bring significant improvements to a whole range of areas, some of which I think if we had the audit tracker, we would see some areas waiting for this finance system so that they can move forward. So, I mean, I guess members, I don't quite know how to put this, wish you all the best for the 1st of November, because that sounds like a key date. And when, after the sort of bedding in process, do you think the improvements will kick in?
Some improvements will kick in straight away. Just to pick up on your point, we've taken the opportunity to refine our coding structure, so they've both been rationalised and reduced, both across Brighter Futures for Children and Reading Borough Council, because we will both share the same financial ledger. They are completely separate in its structural componentry, but they share the same data sets and the same suppliers. So we've reduced and simplified our reporting mechanism. We have built and implemented a new budget forecasting and budget monitoring front end reporting, and that will be available for all budget holders from day one. So that's a significant improvement as well. We're also enhancing our controls around intercompany account transactions, formally setting up a dual authorization for any between company postings. Another improvement, gosh, there's going to be so many. So we're looking at updating our Mosaic payment. The remittance that goes to providers, we're looking to enhance that with better information that will reduce the number of provider queries in adult social care that come through to the payment team. So generally we get queries on what is this payment for, rather than when are you making this payment, and that information is it's quite challenging to be able to provide that in a timely manner for suppliers. So anyway, this will be an improvement in that facility as well. So but underneath this is about updating and refreshing our general ledger structure and giving us the tools from which we can then look at a much wider and longer term finance improvement programme, which not only will upskill the way we in finance operate and provide our services for budget holders, but equally enables them a better platform that they can engage and have faster information available to them in a self-serve environment.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Chair. Good report and all that, and just really wanted to ask about training and whether there's been, I know there was talk of it, but I just wondered whether everyone who should know how to use this thing knows how to use it at this time.
It's we're going to get the timing right for training. So if we trained everybody now immediately, in a month's time, they've forgotten half the processes. So what we've timed our provision of training to occur over the forthcoming few weeks prior to go live, and a number of different formats there. So ranging from videos to watch, self-tuition, self-assessment, but also some very bespoke teams-based training and some face-to-face training as well. And it's all going to be tailored for different categories of users. So accounts payable users are different from people who might do budget monitoring, are different from people who raise purchase orders. So it might be different again for somebody who just wants a general inquiry access. So we've got a whole raft of training solutions available, and our focus will be really driving that home just to make sure that we've got people that are able to use the system and they feel they've got adequate resources and a help desk to call if they have any queries and concerns. So that again is our focus as well, looking forward in the next couple of weeks prior to go live. And we will run refresher courses for the next 3 months as well after go live as well.
Oh, please, yeah.
That training is will it have some sort of hands-on? Will it have some sort of hands-on part to it? You know, not hands-on with a live, but hands-on with some training system. I know that systems, IT systems that I've been working on, when they bring a new system in, they have like a dummy system where people can actually familiarize themselves with how to use it, and the training is conducted on that system. Is there anything like that here?
So yes, in different ways. To get to this point, we've gone through systems testing, which is more technical testing of the system, but also something called user acceptance testing, where we've looked across Reading and we've got examples of users under key business transactions. So the top 30 people who raise purchase orders, and that might account for something like 80% of the volume of purchase orders, have actually undertaken user acceptance testing, which is hands-on, following a script, using the system in a real scenario, and pass that off as being fit for purpose. In terms of the training that we're going through now, some of the facilitated sessions that we'll run via Teams will enable users to actually log on. It's a demonstration first, but also enable them to actually conduct a transaction. And whilst the facilitator is on there, say, actually, I've not quite got this right, they can actually support them online either via face-to-face or online, but it'll be real time, so they'll be accessing a training version of the actual system.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I don't see anyone else indicating. Thank you. January sounds like a good time for an update on how that go live has gone. But yeah. And I guess future reports on the improvements that system makes to finance. So thank you very much indeed. Members, are we happy to note the report? We are. Thank you very much. We move on to item 15, the annual governance statement for 22-23. With an introduction from Mike, is it?
It is,
thank you for sitting through to these last two items.
The annual governance statement, statutory document, which explains the processes and procedures in place to enable the council to carry out its functions effectively. The council, as members will know, is responsible for ensuring that our business is conducted in accordance with the law and proper standards, that public money is safeguarded and properly accounted for and used economically, efficiently and effectively. We also have a duty under the Local Government Act to make arrangements to secure continuous improvement in the way in which our functions are exercised, having a regard to that combination of efficiency, effectiveness and economy. So in discharging these overall duties, the councils are responsible for putting together proper arrangements for the governance of its affairs and facilitating the effective exercise of its functions, including arrangements for the management of risk. And the council delivers good governance and reviews the effectiveness of these arrangements to meet the accounts and audit regulations, and specifically about assessing the effectiveness of the system of internal control, and this document preparing an annual governance statement. So in essence, the statement is an accountability statement from each council to the stakeholders at large, the residents and all our suppliers and staff, etc., on how well it has worked to deliver governance over the course of the previous years, using the 7 principles of the SIP for Solace framework to guide that evaluation. So the annual governance statement reflects significant events in the relevant financial year to which it relates, but it also includes some updating events to when the statement is approved by the committee. Members will note then from the draft annual governance statement, which is before you tonight, that we've reflected on some of the points which were raised last year as points of improvement. And you'll also note some of the points of improvement which we've got drafted in the statement this year, taken principally from that review of effectiveness and the Director Annual Governance Statement process, which we conduct every year. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members were asked to agree the statement and obviously grant delegated authority for any minor amendments. Members, any comments or questions on this? No. I don't think I do either. I read it through. It has the potential to be a very dry document, but it's actually quite readable and contains quite a lot of information that I thought was quite valuable. And it is over to Councillor Brock and Jackie Yates to add their signatures if they're happy to do so, with any minor amends. But we've all read that through and we're all happy that that summarises the position. Yeah, we're all nodding. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for bringing that to us this evening. And we'll move on straight away to 16, Information Governance Quarterly Update. This is also from Mike. Yes, I'll hand back to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Well, this is the report that you've received previously, which will be familiar to you and contains some updates on matters which are relevant. Particularly want to highlight in this report that slow and steady progress has been made on the subject access request backlog. However, the good news on that is that we have now started implementing the system which we've been talking about for some time, which is now being procured and we've contracted for it, and we've had the kick-off meeting and we're starting work on that and documenting the processes for how that system will be used properly and training staff, etc. So that is good news. The FOI cases, as I reported last time, were looking more favourable. Our progress on that front has been marred slightly by the fact that the supplier introduced what was supposed to be an improvement, which sent some of the cases flying haywire all over the place and subsequently affected our stats in the last couple of months. So we are looking very closely at the FOIs at the moment. And we have also, following my comments in the July meeting, met again as officers to consider how we will be taking forward the another action plan, not a formal action plan, which we need to bring back to a committee, but between ourselves to make sure we're not losing track of the FOI progress which we have made. And we have also started work on how we are going to implement the new system when it comes on stream, as the council has purchased the casework and customer management system, and we'll be using that for the FOIs, SARS, member inquiries, MP inquiries, general correspondence management for residents. And that, having seen a demonstration of that in the last month, that looks very hopeful that it's a more user-friendly system, which staff will be able to use, that we can adapt it in multiple ways to be able to suit our needs, that it will have a good range of dashboards and reports in it, which will mean that we're able to get more timely information out. And really, I think the sense that we've got at this stage is allow everybody to have a bit more ownership, oversight and grip of the entire process, which at the minute with the current setup that we've got, people feel slightly detached from it. So that will only help, I think, in our implementation of that system to get us to where we need to be on FOIs. So I've included some further updates in relation to matters considered at the board and the work which is underway with the information management strategy as well.
Thank you very much. We're asked to note the report. Members, any questions? Any thoughts? Any comments? Go on, have a thought. Go on. No. I do have a thought because I attended, along with Councillor Dennis, the IT security workshop, rather than, wasn't training as such, was it? It was more informative, that was run last week or so. And I thought it was a valuable discussion, a valuable piece of information for members to get. So thank you very much. Yes, through you to the officers that helped with that.
Thank you.
I think even though it's getting later on our last one, I might have to just grind my teeth a bit and ask about FOIs in a bit more detail. Is the new system the thing that will get us close to 90%?
It's a combination of the new system and culture, and I think that they will work together. Right. Because I think that the some of the talking to some colleagues today when we were looking through some of the process documents which we've got around FOIs, they've expressed their frustration that when they get FOIs late in the staged process because the system has lost them or they've gone astray and they haven't come back quickly enough, that they're then feeling that they can't deliver on time, especially if they're relying on, the example was given on a key member of staff who's not available to provide the information in, say, 3 days, when previously we would have had 10 to deal with it. Yeah. So where the system allows better visibility to stakeholders like team managers or the AD, and provides better notifications through to people about what is in the system and the timescales and who it's been allocated to, I think it will only help everybody to be able to see this as a task which can be completed within the set timescales.
And where, what's the timescale on that system implementation and the 90%?
They're working on the regulatory side of things first, so we're scheduled to be in next year for the implementation of ours. But to be honest, we're working on it now in the sense that we have already mapped our current processes. We're looking at the capabilities of the current system, and we're mapping out the process. The next stage will be mapping out the processes as we wish them to be on the new system, so that we can work with the supplier, discuss how that's going to look, and how what our requirements are, and how they can be properly implemented to get what we need.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Oh, any more questions? No, there's no one is indicating, and that is absolutely fine. We've all read the report. Thank you very much. Are we happy to note this final report? We are. Thank you very much. Thank you to officers. Thank you to members. Next meeting is January, so have a lovely new year. Yes. Happy Christmas. Happy Christmas.